The Alien Worlds. Sergeant Zach Thanner stepped out of his drop pod onto the purple soil of an alien world, squinting against the harsh glare of the binary suns. His squad emerged behind him, weapons at the ready, their breaths visible in the cool, thin atmosphere. "Atmo is breathable," Zach said, checking his wrist scanner. "No immediate threats, but stay alert. We're here for a reason." Private Jenkins kicked at a cluster of shimmering blue mushrooms. "What kind of backwater rock did the brass send us to this time?" "Can it, Jenkins?" Zach snapped. "We've got a job to do." Command picked up some strange energy readings coming from those ruins over that ridge. "We're here to investigate and report back." The team advanced cautiously, keeping to cover where they could. The landscape was barren, littered with jagged boulders and twisted vegetation. A hot, arid wind swept across the flats, carrying an acrid stench. As they drew closer to the ruins, Zach could make out more details. A squat, asymmetrical pyramid constructed of massive, pitted black stones, covered in strange symbols and carvings. Several of the blocks near the peak had crumbled away, revealing dark openings into the interior. "This place gives me the creeps," Jenkins muttered. "Eyes open, everyone," Zach ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. Could be booby traps, automated defenses, or something worse." The squad moved in, rifles at the ready, their helmet cams capturing everything. The passageway led to a grand, vaulted chamber deep within the temple, where banks of high-tech machinery and control panels lined the walls, humming and blinking with strange alien technology. But it was the massive statue in the center of the room that drew Zach's attention, a towering chiseled figure of a humanoid male, its features stern and noble. "What do you think it is?" Corporal Hernandez asked, her eyes scanning the room. "Some kind of alien god, maybe," Zach replied. "Kowalski, Chang, get scans and samples of everything. Let's." A thunderous boom shook the temple, sending them staggering. Dust rained down from the ceiling as alarms blared from the alien equipment. "Back to the entrance, now," Zach barked, leading the way. But their escape was cut off by a hulking armored figure that blocked their path, a humanoid standing nearly 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and rippling muscles beneath its black bodysuit. It carried a double-headed battle axe, and its helmeted face turned toward them with a menacing glare. "Sockscar," Zach yelled. "Stand back, I've got this." The alien warrior bellowed a challenge and charged, its axe slicing through the air. Zach ducked under the blow, ramming his shoulder into the creature's midsection. They grappled in a furious melee, Zach's pulsed rifle forgotten as he fought hand to hand. The Sockscar was strong, but Zach was faster, using his human agility to evade the worst of the alien's attacks. With a final, desperate move, he locked his arm around the creature's throat, squeezing with all his strength until it went limp and collapsed to the floor. Panting, Zach turned to his squad, who was staring at him in awe. "Holy crap, Sarge," Jenkins said. "That was some straight-up action hero stuff right there." "Just doing my job," Zach muttered, wincing as his bruised body protested. "Now let's get the hell out of here." But before they could move, a holographic screen flickered to life above the control panels. It showed a vast Sockscar city, its sleek towers gleaming under an alien sun, where hundreds of warriors marched and drilled in perfect unison. "Oh, no," Zach breathed as the realization hit him. The Sockscar were preparing to unleash their armies on an unsuspecting galaxy. The screen changed to a view of a lush garden courtyard filled with dozens of beautiful humanoid females, their bodies swaying sensuously to some unheard music. A booming alien voice spoke from the machinery, its strange accent nonetheless understandable. "Human, you have bested our fiercest champion in single combat. By the ancient rights of our people, you have won the privilege of mating with our females. You must sire the next generation of Sockscar warriors and strengthen our species with your superior genes. You have until the next solar alignment to complete this sacred duty. If you do not, your world will suffer the consequences." The transmission cut off, leaving Zack standing in stunned silence, the implications sinking in as a low, ominous gong began to sound in the distance. Jenkins scratched his head. "Ah, Sarge, did that thing just say what I think it said?" Zack ran a hand down his face. "This is beyond FUBAR. I'm so screwed." As the gong continued to echo through the temple, Zack knew they were in for a long, challenging mission, one that could determine the fate of Earth itself. The ultimate ultimatum. Hours had passed since the alien transmission, and the tension in the air was thick. Zack and his squad had established a perimeter around the temple, their nerves on edge as they waited for further instructions. Every noise, every shift in the wind, set them on high alert. Zack paced back and forth, his mind racing with the implications of the situation. He was no stranger to impossible missions, but this was something else entirely. The fate of humanity rested on his ability to— No, he couldn't even bring himself to think it. "Sarge, any word from command?" Hernandez asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Nothing yet," Zack replied, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. "Hernandez, keep trying to raise the Argon. We need to get out of here before those Soxgar warriors regroup." As the squad settled into their positions, Zack found his gaze drawn back to the screen where the alien females continued their seductive dance. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of elaborate trap, a twisted game designed to break him. But even as he tried to focus on the mission, his thoughts kept drifting back to the alien females. They were undeniably attractive, with their smooth, lightly scaled skin and lithe, graceful movements. But this wasn't some sci-fi fantasy. This was real, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Zack was jolted out of his thoughts by a shout from Kowalski. "Sarge, movement on the perimeter." Zack was on his feet in an instant, pulse rifle at the ready. "Report." "Multiple contacts, closing fast from the north," Kowalski said, peering through his scope. "They're big, Sarge, really big." Zack's heart sank. More Soxgar warriors? Or something worse? "All right, listen up," Zack barked, his voice cutting through the tension. "We've got hostiles inbound. I want a firing line established along the ridge. Jenkins, Hernandez, take the flanks. Chang, Kowalski, you're with me in the center. Overlapping fields of fire. Nobody gets through, understood?" A chorus of "Yes, Sergeant," rang out as the squad scrambled to their positions. Zack took a deep breath, his pulse pounding in his ears. This was it. Whatever happened next, they would face it together as a team, and he would do whatever it took to protect them and Earth from the threat that loomed on the horizon. As the alien figures drew closer, Zack could make out their massive forms, hulking, armored warriors, even larger than the one he had fought earlier. But there was something different about them, something even more menacing. Zack tightened his grip on his rifle, steeling himself for the battle ahead. Whatever these creatures were, they were about to find out just how tough humans could be. And as the first of the alien warriors came into view, Zack knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning, the unexpected alliance. Zack's squad held their positions, pulsed rifles trained on the approaching figures. The dimming light of the twin suns cast long shadows across the rocky terrain, making it difficult to discern the nature of their adversaries. Sweat trickled down Zack's brow as he squinted through his scope, trying to make sense of the shapes moving toward them. "Steady," Zack ordered, his voice low and steady despite the tension gnawing at his nerves. "We don't fire until we know what we're dealing with." The figures drew closer, their forms becoming clearer. Zack's heart skipped a beat. These weren't the hulking, armored warriors they had encountered before. Instead, a group of slender, graceful figures emerged from the twilight, their movements fluid and almost hypnotic. They were female, unmistakably so, and clad in the same diaphanous gowns as the women from the holographic screen. "What the hell?" Jenkins muttered, lowering his rifle slightly. "Sarge, are these the same?" Zack held up a hand to silence him. The lead female stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Zach's with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. She was taller than the others, her skin a deep, shimmering blue that seemed to glow in the fading light. Her features were strikingly beautiful, with high cheekbones, full lips, and large, almond-shaped eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She stopped a few meters away, her gaze never leaving Zach's. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and melodic, but laced with an undercurrent of authority. "Human warrior," she began, her words accented but clear, "we mean you no harm. We are here to offer you a proposal." Zach blinked, taken aback. This was the last thing he had expected. A proposal. He echoed cautiously, lowering his rifle slightly but keeping it ready. The female nodded. "You have proven yourself in combat, defeating our champion. By our laws, you have earned the right to sire the next generation of our warriors. However, we understand that you may have reservations about this." Zach's mind raced. Was this some sort of trick? A way to lure him into a false sense of security? But the sincerity in her eyes gave him pause. He decided to play along for now. "I'm not exactly eager to sign up for intergalactic breeding duty," Zach said dryly. "What's your alternative?" The female smiled, a hint of amusement in her expression. "You are wise to be cautious, human. We know that your kind values freedom of choice, something our people have not always understood. That is why we offer you a different path." Zach exchanged a glance with Hernandez, who looked equally perplexed. "Go on," he said, turning back to the alien. "The Council of Elders has convened," she explained, "and they have agreed to grant you a choice. You may either fulfill the traditional role as our sire, or you may lead us in battle." Zach frowned, trying to grasp her meaning. "Lead you in battle? Against who?" The female's expression hardened. "Against the current ruling faction of the Soxgar. They are the ones who ordered the invasion of your world and who seek to use you as nothing more than a tool for their own purposes. But not all of us agree with their methods. There are those among us who wish to forge a new path, one where our people and yours might coexist as equals." Zach felt a flicker of hope. If what she was saying was true, this could be the break they needed. But it also sounded too good to be true. "And why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "For all I know, this could be another ploy to get what you want." The female's eyes softened. "I cannot force you to trust me, human. But know this. Our people are on the brink of civil war. Those who follow the old ways believe in strength through conquest and domination. But there are many of us who believe in strength through unity and cooperation. If we do not act, the old ways will prevail, and both our worlds will suffer." Zach considered her words carefully. The idea of leading an alien rebellion was insane, but it was also the best shot they had at stopping the invasion and protecting Earth. He looked around at his squad, their faces etched with uncertainty, but also with the unwavering trust they placed in him. He took a deep breath and made his decision. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help you. But we're doing this my way." The female nodded, her expression one of relief. "We expected no less. My name is Lyra. I will be your liaison with our forces. Together we will plan the downfall of the ruling faction." As she spoke, more figures emerged from the shadows, other females, but also several male warriors who looked nothing like the brutish Sox Garzach had fought earlier. These warriors had a leaner, more agile build, their eyes sharp and alert. Lyra gestured to them. "These are the rebels who have chosen to follow you. They have been waiting for a leader like you, someone who can unite our people and bring about the change we so desperately need." Zach nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was far from the mission he had been sent on, but it was the one he had now. "All right," he said, addressing both his squad and the rebels. "Let's get to work." As they began to strategize, Zach couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of not just Earth, but an entire alien race now rested in his hands. The road ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back now. With Lyra by his side and his squad ready for anything, Zach prepared to lead the most unlikely alliance in history into battle, the seeds of rebellion. The cavernous chamber where Zach and his squad gathered with the rebels was illuminated by soft, ambient light emanating from the bioluminescent plants clinging to the walls. It was a stark contrast to the cold, metallic corridors of the Soxgar ships they had fought through earlier. The air was thick with anticipation as Lyra and her fellow rebels detailed the plan. Zach stood at the center, his mind racing to absorb the intricacies of the alien rebellion. He felt out of his depth, but the stakes were too high to back down now. His squad, ever loyal, surrounded him, their faces a mixture of resolve and concern. "We're going to strike at the heart of their power," Lyra explained, pointing to a holographic map of the Soxgar capital city. The map shimmered in the air, highlighting key points of interest, fortresses, energy plants, and the central command tower that loomed over the entire city. "The ruling faction has grown complacent," Lara continued, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "They believe their power is unassailable, but we have discovered a weakness. The central command tower controls the planetary defense grid, the very system that would repel any large-scale assault from your kind or others. If we can take it down, we'll not only cripple their defenses, but also send a message to the entire planet that their reign is over." Zach studied the map intently. "And how do we do that without getting ourselves vaporized?" he asked, his tone pragmatic. A tall, wiry male alien with piercing yellow eyes, introduced as Thal, stepped forward. "We have sympathizers within the tower," he said, "engineers and technicians who are loyal to our cause. They've been planting sabotage protocols within the system for months, but they need a trigger. Someone to lead a coordinated assault that will provide the necessary distraction." Lyra nodded. "That's where you come in, Zach. Your squad will lead the ground assault on the tower's perimeter. Meanwhile, our forces will infiltrate from the inside, using the chaos to seize control of the command center." Zach frowned, considering the risks. "It sounds like a solid plan, but what happens once we've taken the tower? The ruling faction won't just roll over and surrender." "That's why we must act quickly," Lyra replied. "Once the tower is in our hands, we'll broadcast a message to the entire planet, declaring the end of the current regime and the beginning of a new era. We believe that many within the military and civilian population will rally to our cause once they see that the old ways are no longer sustainable." Zach exchanged a look with Hernandez, who gave a slight nod. "All right," Zach said, turning back to Lyra. "We'll do it. But we need to ensure the safety of our squad and any civilians caught in the crossfire. We're not here to start a massacre." Lyra's gaze softened. "We share your concern, Zach. Our goal is to liberate, not to destroy. We'll coordinate with our forces to minimize casualties and ensure that our victory doesn't come at the cost of innocent lives." With the plan in place, Zach's squad began preparing for the mission. They reviewed the layout of the capital city, memorized key access points, and synchronized their equipment with the alien tech provided by the rebels. The atmosphere was tense but focused, everyone fully aware of the monumental task ahead. As they geared up, Zach found himself alone with Lyra for a moment. She observed him with a mix of curiosity and admiration, clearly sensing the weight he bore as a leader. "You seem troubled," she remarked, her voice gentle. Zach hesitated before responding. "I'm just trying to make sense of all this. A week ago, I was a soldier fighting for Earth's survival. Now I'm leading an alien rebellion. It's a lot to take in." Lyra smiled faintly. "I can understand that. But you should know, Zach, that you've inspired something in us that we didn't think was possible, hope. We've been fighting for so long, but it wasn't until you arrived that we truly believed we could win." Her words gave Zach pause. He had always seen himself as a soldier, someone who followed orders and did what needed to be done. But now, in this strange new world, he was becoming something more, a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for a people who had been oppressed for generations. "I just hope we can pull this off," Zack said, his voice heavy with the responsibility he felt. "We will," Lyra assured him, her eyes shining with conviction, "because we have no other choice." The next day, the assault began. Zapp's squad moved through the outskirts of the Soxgar capital, using the terrain to their advantage as they approached the command tower. The city was a sprawling mass of alien architecture, with towering spires and interconnecting bridges that cast deep shadows over the streets below. The tower itself loomed above them, a monolithic structure of steel and glass that seemed to pierce a sky. "Stay sharp," Zach whispered into his comms as they reached the first checkpoint. "We're deep in enemy territory now." The squad advanced cautiously, their pulse rifles at the ready. They encountered little resistance at first, the streets eerily quiet. But as they neared the tower, the atmosphere grew tense. Alien patrols began to appear, their armor gleaming in the harsh light of the city's artificial sun. Zat signaled for his squad to take cover as a patrol passed by. They waited, hearts pounding, until the patrol was out of sight before moving again. "Almost there," Hernandez whispered, his voice barely audible over the comms. As they reached the base of the tower, the true scale of their task became apparent. The entrance was heavily guarded, with elite Soxgar soldiers patrolling the perimeter. Zach knew they couldn't take them all head-on without losing the element of surprise. "Diversion team, you're up," Zach ordered. A small group of rebels broke off, heading toward a nearby energy plant that powered part of the tower's defense systems. Moments later, an explosion rocked the ground, sending a shockwave through the city. The guards at the entrance immediately sprang into action, rushing toward the source of the blast. "Go, go, go," Zach urged his squad. They moved swiftly, slipping past the distracted guards and entering the tower's lower levels. Inside, the corridors were a maze of alien technology and unfamiliar symbols. The squad relied on the intel provided by the rebels, following the path that would lead them to the command center. As they ascended through the tower, the sounds of battle echoed from below. The rebels were engaging the tower's defenders, buying Zap's squad the time they needed to reach their target. "Command center is just ahead," Thal's voice crackled over the comms. "Our inside team is in position." Zach nodded to his squad, signaling them to prepare for the final push. "This is it, people. Stay close and watch each other's backs." They breached the doors to the command center, pulse rifles raised and ready. Inside, they found a group of Soxgar officers, startled by the sudden intrusion. But before they could react, the inside team of rebels sprang into action, taking control of the room with precision and efficiency. "Control of the tower is secure," Lyra's voice came through, filled with triumph, broadcasting the message now. A large screen in the command center flickered to life, displaying Lyra's image as she addressed the entire planet. Her words were powerful, a rallying cry for freedom and unity that resonated throughout the city and beyond. Zach watched as the message spread, the tide of battle beginning to turn in their favor. The ruling faction's forces were thrown into disarray, their chain of command shattered by the loss of the tower. Rebels across the city rallied to the cause, pushing back against their oppressors with renewed vigor. For the first time since the invasion began, it felt like victory was within reach. But Zach knew the fight wasn't over yet. The ruling faction would not go down without a final, desperate struggle. And as the planet teetered on the brink of change, he could only hope that the rebellion's flames would burn bright enough to forge a new future for both their peoples. With the command tower under their control and the rebellion spreading like wildfire, Zach steeled himself for the battles yet to come. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, but the harvest was still uncertain. As Lyra's broadcast ended, she turned to Zach with a fierce determination in her eyes. "Now, we must hold what we've taken," she said. "The real test is just beginning." Zach nodded, ready for whatever came next. "Then let's show them what we're made of." The battle for freedom. The rebellion had begun to spread across the planet, igniting pockets of resistance in every major city. From the skies, where smoke from burning fortresses spiraled into the atmosphere, to the underground tunnels where refugees and fighters hid. The entire world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the final confrontation. Zack stood atop a makeshift platform in the command tower, overlooking the chaotic city below. The battle was intensifying with each passing hour. Alien and human forces clashed in the streets, their energies fueling the flames of conflict. The once gleaming Soxgar capital was now a war zone, a battleground for the future of an entire civilization. Hernandez approached Zach, his face etched with exhaustion, but still burning with determination. The rebels are holding the line, but the ruling faction is throwing everything they have at us. It's only a matter of time before they launch a full-scale assault on the tower. Zach nodded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. They know losing this tower means losing the planet. They'll fight tooth and nail to take it back. Lara joined them, her expression equally grim. Our allies in other cities report similar resistance. The ruling faction is desperate, and they're willing to burn the entire planet down to stay in power. We can't let that happen, Zach said firmly. We've come too far to let them win now. Lara's gaze softened as she looked at Zach. Your people have done more for us than we could have ever asked for. No matter what happens next, know that we are grateful. Zach turned to face her fully. We're in this together, Lara. We'll see it through. A sudden explosion rocked the tower, sending tremors through the structure. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the command center's systems detected the breach. They're here, Hernandez growled, tightening his grip on his rifle. Zach's heart pounded in his chest. Everyone to your positions. Defend the tower at all costs. The tower's lower levels quickly became a maze of gunfire and chaos. Zach and his squad led the charge, coordinating with the rebel forces to repel wave after wave of the ruling faction's troops. The sound of pulse rifles, alien weapons, and explosions filled the air, mingling with the cries of the wounded and the shouts of orders. As the battle raged, Zach found himself fighting alongside Lara, the two of them covering each other as they pushed forward. She fought with a fierce determination, her movements fluid and deadly, her resolve unshakable. You're not half bad with that, Zach remarked, nodding to the energy blade she wielded with expert precision. Lara managed a brief smile, even as she disarmed and incapacitated an enemy soldier. I had good teachers. Despite their best efforts, the ruling faction's forces were relentless. The sheer number of troops and the advanced technology at their disposal made it clear that the rebels were outgunned and outnumbered. The enemy was closing in on the command center, their objective clear: to retake the tower and crush the rebellion once and for all. We're losing ground, Hernandez shouted over the din of battle as they fell back to the last line of defense before the command center. Zach gritted his teeth. We can't hold them off forever. We need to do something drastic. Lara's eyes flashed with an idea. The power core. If we overload it, we could take out the entire tower, and with it, most of the ruling faction's forces in the city. Zach hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. Destroying the tower would mean sacrificing their stronghold, but it could also turn the tide of the battle in their favor. Do it, he said, his voice resolute, but we need to give everyone time to evacuate. Lyra nodded, already moving to the control panel. I'll set the core to overload. You make sure our people get out. Zach turned to Hernandez. Get the word out to all units. Fall back and evacuate the tower immediately. We've got 10 minutes before this place goes up in flames. Hernandez relayed the order through his comms, his voice carrying a sense of urgency. Around them, the remaining rebel forces began to retreat, fighting their way through the enemy lines as they made their way to the exits. As Lyra worked on the power core, Zach and his squad provided cover, holding off the advancing enemy troops. The room was filled with the hum of the core as it began to overload, its energy levels rising to dangerous levels. Time's running out, Lyra, Zach called out, firing at a group of enemy soldiers trying to breach the room. Almost there, she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. Finally, the core's energy reached critical levels, and Lyra activated the final sequence. It's done. We have 5 minutes before the tower goes critical. Zut grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the controls. Let's go. They sprinted through the tower's corridors, the walls vibrating as the core's imminent explosion drew closer. The enemy forces, realizing what was happening, began to fall back as well, but many were too slow to escape the blast radius. Zach, Lyra, Hernandez, and the remaining members of the squad burst out of the tower's main entrance, joining the fleeing rebels outside. They didn't stop running until they were a safe distance away, the tower looming behind them like a ticking time bomb. As they reached cover, Zach turned to look back at the tower, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The structure seemed to tremble, and for a moment, there was an eerie silence. Then, with a deafening roar, the power core detonated. The explosion was blinding, a massive shockwave ripping through the city. The command tower disintegrated in an instant, taking out everything in a wide radius around it. The ground shook, and a plume of smoke and debris shot into the sky, darkening the horizon. The rebels and their allies shielded their eyes from the blast, the sheer force of the explosion making the ground beneath them tremble. When the dust finally began to settle, the tower was gone, reduced to rubble. The once imposing structure was nothing more than a smoldering crater, surrounded by the ruins of the ruling faction's forces. Zach surveyed the aftermath, his heart pounding. They had succeeded in taking out the tower and dealing a devastating blow to the ruling faction, but at a great cost. The city lay in ruins, and the battle was far from over. Lyra stood beside him, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "We've done it," she said softly, "but the fight isn't over yet." Zach nodded, knowing that she was right. The ruling faction had been crippled, but they still had strongholds across the planet. The rebellion would need to press their advantage and liberate the rest of the world before they could claim victory. But for now, they had won a crucial battle, a turning point in their fight for freedom. As the rebels began to regroup and tend to the wounded, Zach looked out over the city. The road ahead was still long and fraught with danger, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. "Let's finish this," he said, determination hardening his voice. The dawn of a new era. In the aftermath of the tower's destruction, the rebels and their allies began to consolidate their gains. The once bustling city now lay in ruins, but the spirit of the resistance was unbroken. The collapse of the command tower had delivered a severe blow to the ruling faction, but it had also revealed the enormity of the task ahead. The planet was still occupied by loyalists and the remnants of the ruling elite, and the battle for freedom was far from over. Zach and Lyra stood in the command center of a newly established rebel stronghold, a makeshift base in one of the city's undestroyed sectors. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the low hum of activity as rebels and civilians worked together to rebuild and plan their next moves. Maps and tactical displays covered the walls, with scattered reports and communications streaming in from various fronts. Hernandez approached them, his face wary but determined. "We've received reports from all major cities. The ruling faction is regrouping, but their ability to launch coordinated attacks has been severely crippled. It's the perfect opportunity to push forward." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the data on the tactical display. "We need to seize this moment. If we can capture the remaining strongholds and secure key resources, we can turn the tide in our favor." Zach agreed, his gaze fixed on the display. "We'll need to coordinate with our allies across the planet. The sooner we can unify our efforts, the faster we can bring this to an end." The days following the tower's destruction were a whirlwind of activity. Rebel forces, now bolstered by the people's renewed hope, launched coordinated assaults on the remaining strongholds of the ruling faction. Cities that had once been symbols of oppression began to fall into the hands of the resistance, and the tide of war began to shift. But as the battles raged on, Zat couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. Every victory brought them closer to liberation, but it also meant facing new challenges and making difficult decisions. The fight for freedom was not just a physical struggle, it was also a test of their resolve and unity. One evening, as Zach and Lyra reviewed the latest intelligence reports, a transmission came in from one of their key allies, a representative from a distant city that had been a focal point of resistance. Zach, Lyra, the ally's voice crackled through the comms. We've managed to intercept communications from the ruling faction. They're preparing a final, desperate push to reclaim their power. They're planning a large-scale offensive that could potentially reverse all our progress. Zach's jaw tightened. How soon will they launch this offensive? Within the next 48 hours, the ally replied. We need to act quickly to prevent them from consolidating their forces. Lyra's expression hardened with resolve. We can't let them retake control. We need to launch a preemptive strike to dismantle their offensive before it starts. Zach nodded in agreement. Let's prepare our forces. We'll strike at their key command centers and logistics hubs. If we can disrupt their plans and cut off their supply lines, we can turn their offensive into a last-ditch effort with no chance of success. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation and mobilization. Rebel forces were mobilized, with strategic positions being fortified and key locations being targeted for the offensive. The air was thick with tension as every member of the resistance understood the gravity of the situation. This would be the decisive moment that could either secure their freedom or plunge them back into oppression. Lyra nodded, her resolve matching his. Together. As dawn approached, the final assault began. Rebel troops, armed with advanced technology and fierce determination, pushed into enemy territory. The sky was lit with explosions as the two sides clashed in a series of intense battles. The ground shook with the force of the fighting, and the air was filled with the roar of combat. Zach led a squadron on the front lines, moving with precision and purpose. Every step was a testament to their training and unity. Lyra fought beside him, her energy blade flashing as she cut through enemy defenses. Hernandez and his team coordinated air support, their fighter jets swooping in to provide crucial cover and firepower. Despite the fierce resistance, the rebels pushed forward with relentless determination. Key command centers were overrun, and logistics hubs were destroyed, disrupting the ruling faction's ability to mount a coordinated defense. The momentum began to shift in favor of the resistance as the enemy's plans unraveled. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the ruling faction's stronghold, a heavily fortified complex that had been the symbol of their power. The battle was fierce and brutal, with both sides fighting for every inch of ground. The rebels, driven by the hope of a better future, fought with unparalleled tenacity. Zach, Lyra, and Hernandez spearheaded the assault on the stronghold's central command. The enemy forces, though well-trained, were demoralized and disorganized, their leadership in disarray. The rebels fought their way through the complex, engaging in fierce combat with the ruling faction's elite guards. As they reached the central command room, they encountered the ruling faction's leaders, a group of high-ranking officials who had orchestrated the oppression of their people. The confrontation was intense, a clash of ideals and wills. One of the leaders, a high-ranking official with a cold, calculating demeanor, faced Zach and Lyra. You may have won a few battles, but you'll never truly defeat us. The ruling faction is eternal. Zach's gaze was unwavering. Not if we have anything to say about it. Your reign of terror ends here. With a final decisive push, the rebels overpowered the remaining forces and secured the stronghold. The ruling faction's leaders were taken into custody, their authority shattered. The stronghold's capture marked the beginning of the end for the oppressive regime. In the days that followed, the remaining loyalists surrendered or fled, and the planet began to recover from the devastation of the conflict. The people celebrated their newfound freedom, and the rebels who had fought so hard for their liberation were hailed as heroes. Zach, Lyra, and Hernandez stood together in the heart of the city, now a symbol of hope and renewal. The once ruined landscape was beginning to show signs of rebuilding, with the first steps towards a new era of peace and prosperity. As they looked out over the city, Zat felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The struggle had been arduous, but they had achieved their goal. The future was still uncertain, but the people had the chance to shape it according to their own values and dreams. Lara turned to Zach, her eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun. "We've done it. The planet is free." Zach nodded, a sense of pride and fulfillment filling his heart. "Yes, we have. And now it's time to build a better future for everyone." With the dawn of a new era on the horizon, the people of the planet looked forward with hope and determination. The battles had been fierce, but the promise of freedom and the strength of their unity had triumphed. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the city, the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. The promise of tomorrow. As the dust settled and the final remnants of the ruling faction were swept away, the planet began its transition from an era of oppression to one of hope and renewal. The once battered cities were now bustling with activity as the people embarked on the monumental task of rebuilding their world. The spirit of unity and resilience that had carried them through the conflict now fueled their efforts to forge a brighter future. Zach, Lyra, and Hernandez found themselves at the heart of this transformation, not as leaders of a rebellion, but as architects of a new society. Their role had shifted from fighters to visionaries, guiding the reconstruction and laying the groundwork for a democratic and just governance. The three of them met frequently with representatives from various sectors of society, including former rebels, civic leaders, and even former members of the ruling faction who had defected. These meetings were crucial in ensuring that the new government would be inclusive and representative of all voices. One morning, they gathered in the newly established Central Council building, a symbol of the new order. The building was modest but functional, designed to reflect the values of transparency and openness. Zach looked around at the diverse group assembled, each individual carrying the weight of their respective communities. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze focused and resolute. "We've made significant progress, but there's still much work to be done. We need to establish a framework that ensures equal representation and fair distribution of resources." Hernandez nodded in agreement. "We must also address the issues of reconstruction and aid distribution. Many areas are still in dire need of assistance, and we can't afford to let them fall behind." The discussions were productive, with many ideas and proposals being debated and refined. The council focused on creating a constitution that would guarantee fundamental rights and freedoms, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. They also worked on establishing a series of reforms aimed at dismantling the structures of inequality and corruption that had plagued the previous regime. As the weeks turned into months, the planet began to show tangible signs of recovery. The once destroyed cities were gradually rebuilt, their infrastructure repaired and modernized. The economy, which had been severely impacted by the conflict, began to stabilize, thanks to a combination of international aid and local innovation. Zat and Lyra continued to be actively involved in the process, traveling to different regions to assess the progress and address any emerging challenges. Their efforts were met with gratitude and optimism from the people who had come to see them as symbols of hope and change. One day, during a visit to a rural area that had been particularly hard hit by the conflict, Zach and Lyra encountered a group of local farmers. The farmers, that are still grappling with the aftermath of the war, welcomed them with warmth and appreciation. A middle-aged farmer named Alaric approached Zach with a broad smile. "It's good to see you here, Zach. Your efforts have made a real difference. We're beginning to rebuild our farms and our lives." Zach returned the smile, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I'm glad to hear that. The progress you're making is inspiring. If there's anything more we can do to support you, just let us know." As they spoke with the farmers and learned about their needs and aspirations, Zach and Lyra realized the importance of grassroots involvement in the rebuilding process. The success of their efforts depended not just on high-level decisions, but on the active participation and empowerment of every community. Back at the Central Council, The process of drafting the new constitution was nearing completion. The council members, having worked diligently for months, were proud of the document that would guide the planet into a new era. The Constitution enshrined principles of democracy, human rights, and social justice, ensuring that the governance structures would be accountable and transparent. When the day finally came to present the new constitution to the people, it was met with widespread approval and celebration. The ceremony was held in the city's central square, now a vibrant symbol of renewal and unity. The air was filled with excitement and anticipation as the people gathered to witness this historic moment. Zach, Lyra, and Hernandez stood before the crowd, their faces reflecting a mix of pride and humility. The Constitution was unveiled, and the crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing with the promise of a brighter future. The sense of collective achievement was palpable as the people celebrated not just the end of a long struggle, but the beginning of a new chapter in their history. In the weeks following the adoption of the Constitution, the new government began its work, implementing the reforms and policies outlined in the document. The focus was on rebuilding infrastructure, improving public services, and fostering economic development. The process was complex and challenging, but the foundation had been laid for a more equitable and just society. Zach, Lyra, and Hernandez continued to play active roles, offering their expertise and guidance as needed. They remained committed to ensuring that the promises made during the revolution were fulfilled and that the values of freedom and justice were upheld. As time went on, the planet's recovery gained momentum. The once ruined cities flourished, and communities that had been torn apart by conflict began to heal. The people, inspired by their shared struggle and triumph, worked together to create a society that reflected their highest ideals. One evening, as Zach and Lyra walked through the streets of a city that had been a focal point of the conflict, they marveled at the transformation. The city was alive with activity, its streets bustling with people going about their lives with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Lyra turned to Zach, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the streetlights. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Zach nodded, his heart full of gratitude and optimism. "Yes, we have. It's been a hard-fought journey, but the future is bright. The people have shown incredible strength and resilience." As they continued their walk, Zach and Lyra knew that their work was far from over. The road to building a just and prosperous society was ongoing, and there would be challenges ahead. But the progress they had made and the unity they had fostered gave them confidence that the future was in capable hands. The planet was on the path to a new dawn, and as the stars illuminated the night sky, it felt like the promise of a new beginning was within reach. The legacy of their struggle and their commitment to a better future would guide the planet into an era of peace and prosperity, a testament to the enduring power of hope, resilience, and the shared dream of a brighter tomorrow.